$500 for catching a fish. That's the first thought that burns through my head as I stand on my porch, the paper trembling in my hand. Not from the breeze, from me. My rod is still there, leaning lazy against the railing, the line still curled where I left it last night. I can smell the faint trace of the lake on it, that damp, earthy scent that always makes me feel calm, or at least it used to. The slip is printed in neat black ink, unauthorized fishing, violation of HOA Rule 14.3, fine $500. The words look so tidy for something so petty, so personal. My stomach twists. Out on the sidewalk, Mrs. Crane slows her little white terrier just enough to glance at me. Her eyes flick from the paper to my face, and then she gives that tiny, satisfied smirk I've seen before, the kind that says she already knows, and she's not surprised. I fold the slip in half, maybe harder than I need to. The sound is sharp in the morning air. Behind her, another neighbor walks by, earbuds in, but his gaze lingers. It's like the whole street got the same memo. I've been marked. It's not about fishing. I know that the way you know when someone's lying but smiling while they do it. Last night the lake was quiet, the kind of quiet you don't get often around here, with the cicadas buzzing and the streetlights casting gold on the ripples. I'd gone down there after dinner, needing that stillness. The moon was thin, the air thick with the smell of pine and water. I didn't take much. A folding chair, a cheap tackle box, a promise to myself I'd only stay an hour. I didn't even keep the fish. Just caught, released, breathed. But in this neighborhood, peace is apparently a privilege. I glance down the street toward the lake now, though I can't see it from here. Just the curve of asphalt and the perfect line of mailbox posts. Somewhere beyond that curve is the dock where I sat last night, where I felt for a brief stretch like I belonged in my own life. And now, a slip of paper is telling me I don't. I can guess who wrote it, or rather, who made sure it was written. That knowledge has a taste, metallic, bitter, the kind that makes you want to spit. Inside, the house is too still. My coffee's gone cold on the counter, the morning news murmuring low from the living room. I should crumple the paper, toss it, be done with it, pay the fine and keep my head down like a good little resident. That's the smart move in a place like this, where power hides behind smiles and bylaws, but something in me resists. I run my finger along the crease in the paper, feeling the edge like it's a blade. I think about the way they want this to feel, like I've been caught, like I'm guilty. They want me to remember this every time I think about taking my chair down to the water again. My phone buzzes on the counter, a text from my sister. How's the weekend so far? I stare at it for a long moment before flipping the phone face down. I don't even know how I'd explain this to someone who doesn't live here, to someone who doesn't understand that in an HOA like ours, the smallest things aren't small at all. They're warnings. Outside, another dog walker passes, a dad with a stroller. Life goes on like nothing happened, but I can feel the eyes, always the eyes. The street feels narrower now, the air heavier. I lean against the doorframe, looking out at this place I bought into thinking it would be safe, clean, predictable. I thought I was buying peace. Instead, I bought into a game I didn't know I was playing. The fine says I broke a rule, but the truth is, what I really broke was the unspoken order here, the quiet agreement about who gets to bend the rules and who doesn't, and apparently I'm in the second category. I slide the paper into the kitchen drawer, the one with all the junk mail and spare keys, but I don't forget it. Not the paper, not the smirk, not the way my name will probably get whispered at the next HOA meeting. This wasn't about fishing, and I have a feeling it's only the first cast. Some people don't need a crown to rule, they just need a clipboard and the right shade of lipstick. By noon I knew. Of course I knew. Marla Jennings, 8 years as president of the HOA and still hungry, like she's trying to break some record for longest reign over the smallest kingdom. She sits in the clubhouse like it's her palace, the big glass windows framing her like a portrait, every hair in place, nails gleaming, smile perfectly set. From a distance, she looks like hospitality itself. Up close, you see the edge. When I walk in, She's in the middle of telling a landscaper exactly how many inches the hedges on Birch Court should be trimmed. Not about this tall, not a little shorter. Inches. Exact. Her voice is warm, almost sugary, but it leaves no room for argument. The landscaper just nods, scribbles something, and escapes. She spots me before I even open my mouth. "Ah," she says, like she's been expecting me. The fisherman. That smile doesn't move when she says it, but her eyes, they sharpen. She waves me over with a flick of her manicured fingers. I sit across from her, the polished surface of the table between us reflecting the light in thin, cold strips. "I assume you got the fine," she says. Not a question. "I did," I answer. "Rules are rules," she replies, leaning back. Her tone is polite, but the way she says it feels less like a reminder and more like a verdict. Something about the way she's watching me, head slightly tilted, eyes steady, makes it clear she's enjoying this. Not the fine itself, maybe, but what it represents: control. She has it. I don't. I could argue. Tell her no one was there last night, that I didn't leave so much as a wrapper on the dock, that fishing was just fishing, but I can tell it wouldn't matter. This isn't about the act, it's about the act of defiance, about her catching it, about making sure I know I've been caught. "Not everyone gets a warning," she adds, her tone slipping into something almost conspiratorial. "Some of the board wanted to double it. I let that hang between us. There's nothing casual about this conversation. Every word is chosen, every pause is loaded. She wants me to feel grateful that she's keeping the punishment at 500. She wants me to feel like she's done me a favor, but I don't. Instead, I study her. The way her hands rest lightly on the table, but her fingers never stop moving, tapping, aligning her pen with the edge of her notepad. The way her eyes flick, just once, to the door behind me, as if checking who might be watching. She's not just talking to me, she's putting on a performance, even here, even now. I've seen this before. People who make small territories feel like empires, who enforce order, not because it's necessary, but because it reminds everyone of their place. And in this little empire, Marla Jennings is both queen and executioner. "I'm sure you understand," she says finally. I nod once. I understand perfectly. Her smile widens a fraction, satisfied. She thinks that's the end of it. I stand, thank her, and step outside into the afternoon heat. But I don't head home right away. I pause just outside the clubhouse doors, the sun hot on the back of my neck, and I look back through the glass. Marla is already leaning toward someone else, a middle-aged man in golf attire, nodding furiously while she points at a form in front of him. It's a strange thing, watching someone like that work. You almost start to believe they're right, that their rules are the air you breathe, until you remember that air is free. I walk back toward my house, each step slower than the last. The fine still burns in my pocket, but now it's layered with something else, something sharper. Marla wanted me to know she saw me, that she could reach into my life and leave a mark without lifting more than a pen. She wanted me to feel the weight of her presence, the inevitability of her word, and I did feel it, for about 10 minutes. But as I turn the corner toward my street, another thought rises, unshakable and electric. If she wanted me to feel powerless, she just accomplished the opposite. Some traps aren't set to catch you, they're set to see if you'll bite. At first I told myself to just pay it. $500, irritating but survivable, a clean break, a fresh start, and no more walking into the clubhouse with Marla's eyes tracking me like a hawk. That was the plan, until I ran into Mrs. Latham. She was out front, trimming the rosebush that's been in her yard longer than the HOA has existed. 80 years old, stooped but sharp, the kind of woman who could tell you the full history of every house on the block. I stopped to say hello, and somewhere between weather talk and rose care, she asked, "They get you too?" "Excuse me," I said. "The fine?" She nodded toward my place. Fishing, wasn't it? Her tone wasn't surprised, it was resigned, like she'd already put me in some unspoken category. And when I asked what she meant, she told me, not just about herself, but about others. The new couple on Oak Drive, fined for leaving their recycling bins out overnight. The Martinez family, dinged for a trampoline visible from the street. The retired vet across from me, warned twice for his flag being non-regulation size, always the same pattern, small infractions, maximum penalties, and always the same people. The ones who don't show up to every HOA meeting, the ones who keep to themselves, the ones who for whatever reason don't fit Marla's image of the perfect resident. Mrs. Latham leaned on her shears and lowered her voice. I've been here long enough to know when rules are for order and when they're for control. This is control. Her words settled in me like a stone dropped into deep water, slow, heavy, unshakable. On the walk back to my house, I replayed the list in my head, every story, every fine. It wasn't random. It wasn't even about the rules. It was about making sure everyone knew who was at the top of the food chain here, and what happened if you swam against the current. I sat on my porch for a long while, the late afternoon sun angling low, turning the neighborhood gold. From the outside it all looked so perfect. Fresh paint, trimmed lawns, kids riding bikes without a care. But underneath, I could see the lines now. Invisible threads running from every front door back to Marla's chair in the clubhouse, and that's when something in me shifted. Before, the fine was just a nuisance, an irritation. I could have written a check, shoved the whole thing into the drawer where forgotten bills go to die, but now it had teeth. Because it wasn't just about me, it was about all of us who'd been nudged, fined, warned and reminded who held the rulebook. I thought about Mrs. Latham, carefully tending her roses while knowing full well she was one missed trash can away from another citation. I thought about the Martinez kids, bouncing on a trampoline their parents had to fold up and hide every night. And I thought about how Marla smiled when she told me rules are rules, as if the rules were written in stone, when in reality, she was the one holding the chisel. The longer I sat there, the clearer it became. This wasn't ending with a check and an apology. Because here's the thing about control, it only works if everyone believes in it. And for the first time I didn't. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept picturing the lake, dark and still, the surface smooth enough to hide anything moving beneath. All day I'd been thinking about fines and neighbors and rules, but now my mind kept returning to that water, the place where this all started, the place Marla claimed to own through bylaws and leases and signatures. But what if she didn't? It was a dangerous thought, the kind you don't even want to say out loud in case it dissolves under scrutiny. Still, it lodged itself in my mind. Lying there in the dark, I realized something I hadn't before. She might have the clipboard, the board meetings, the power of the vote, but every empire has weak points, and sometimes, you don't fight power by going head to head. Sometimes, you go for what's feeding it. And here, in this neighborhood, it wasn't the streets or the clubhouse that gave Marla her throne, it was the lake. Some revolutions start with a gunshot. Mine started with a printer humming in the dark. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow from my laptop throwing shadows across the floor. The HOA's bylaws were open on the screen, line after line of rules written in that stiff legal language designed to make normal people stop reading. But I didn't stop. I read every word. Most of it was exactly what I expected. Lawn height restrictions, trash pickup regulations, parking limits, pages and pages of ways to be told you're wrong. But then buried deep in section 14, under lake use and maintenance, I saw it. One sentence. 13 words. The association shall lease the lake and adjoining property from its legal owner. Lease, not own. I stared at the word, letting it sink in. Lease meant temporary. Lease meant someone else held the deed, which meant Marla's kingdom, the one she guarded so fiercely, wasn't truly hers. I printed the entire document, the pages sliding out one by one, warm to the touch. I circled the clause in thick red ink, the kind of circle you make when you've just found a crack in the wall. I sat there tapping the pen against the table, feeling the first faint stirrings of something I hadn't let myself feel in days. Possibility. Ownership is power. Everyone knows that. If you own the thing people want, you don't just make the rules, you are the rule. And if the HOA didn't own the lake,
then maybe, just maybe, the balance could shift. The idea was reckless. It didn't even have a clear shape yet, but it was alive. I opened my email and typed a short, careful request to the county records office. Parcel number, property name, owner history, anything they had. My fingers hovered over the send button for a moment. This wasn't a formal complaint. It wasn't a public fight. Not yet. It was just planting a seed. I clicked send. The sound was so small, but in the stillness, it felt like the loudest thing in the room. Leaning back, I thought about Marla, sitting in her chair at the clubhouse, sipping her tea like she was born to it. I thought about the way she'd smiled when she told me, rules are rules. She believed she had every piece on the board locked in place, and maybe she did. But what happens when you take away the board? I folded the printed bylaws and slid them into a manila folder. On the outside, in black marker, I wrote one word, lake. It wasn't much. It wasn't the kind of move that would make the neighbors whisper, or the board call an emergency meeting. But it was the first real step I'd taken that wasn't about reacting to her. It was about acting for myself. That mattered. Before shutting down for the night, I stood at the window that overlooked the street. The lampposts glowed in their perfect intervals, casting clean lines of light on the asphalt. Somewhere beyond those lights was the water, still and dark, carrying the reflection of the moon. I imagined it in daylight, alive with the shimmer of waves and the quiet splash of a cast line. If the records came back the way I hoped, that water might not just be a place I visited anymore. It could be mine, and for the first time since the fine, I didn't feel boxed in. I didn't feel small. I felt patient. The kind of patience you have when you're holding the first card in a game. No one else knows you're playing. Power never looks uglier than when it's dressed up as civility. The board meeting starts like they always do. The shuffle of papers, the soft clink of coffee cups, the forced cheer in Marla's voice as she welcomes everyone like she's hosting a garden party. But under it all, there's tension. You can feel it in the way the air seems to hum, in the way the chairs creak when people shift but don't speak. I sit near the back, hands folded, eyes steady. I'm not here to talk, I'm here to watch. The first few agenda items are nothing: landscaping budgets, paint color approvals, the annual barbecue. But then Marla turns to a woman in the front row. Her name is Beth, a single mom I've seen walking her little boy to the bus stop every morning. She's soft-spoken, maybe early 30s, with that tired, polite smile of someone who's learned to avoid making waves. Marla clears her throat and announces that Beth will be fined $250 for improper holiday decor. The phrase sounds absurd in her mouth, but she says it like it's sacred law. Beth blinks, confused. Apparently the lights she strung on her porch last month didn't align with the HOA's approved color scheme. Beth tries to explain that she used what she already had, that it made her son happy, that she took them down right after the holidays. But Marla cuts her off with a raised hand and a warm, dismissive smile. Rules are rules, she says for the second time in as many weeks. The minutes recorder scribbles it down like gospel. Around the table, the other board members shift. One clears his throat, another glances at Beth, then quickly away. Not one of them speaks, not one of them dares. Beth nods quietly, pressing her lips together. I see her knuckles tighten around her purse strap. The room moves on. Something in me twists. This isn't about decor. It's the same pattern Mrs. Latham told me about. Small rule, heavy hand, easy target. And the board, they're just props in Marla's theater. I stay for another 20 minutes, listening to discussions about tree trimming schedules and budget reallocations, but I can't focus. My mind keeps going back to the lake. That one sentence in the bylaws, the association shall lease the lake. It's been growing roots in me ever since I read it. And now sitting here, it's all I can think about. If the HOA doesn't own the lake, then someone else does. A person, a company, somebody whose name is sitting on a deed in a drawer somewhere. Who owns it now? It's the question I can't shake. If that owner decided to raise the lease rate, or end the lease altogether, what would happen to Marla's control? What would happen to every smug fine, every quiet act of intimidation? The meeting drones on. Marla's voice smooth and commanding. I let my gaze drift to her hands as she speaks. Perfect nails, rings that flash under the fluorescent lights, the kind of hands that never touch the mess they make. I push my chair back slowly, careful not to draw attention. Marla glances my way but doesn't pause. I give her a polite nod, the kind that says you win, and slip out into the hallway. The air outside the meeting room feels lighter, but my thoughts are heavier. The parking lot is mostly empty, the night pressing in close. My car is parked under one of the few working lights, and as I walk toward it, I realize I'm not leaving defeated. Not really, this was just reconnaissance. Because if I can answer that one question, if I can find out who holds the deed to that lake, then I'll have more than suspicion. I'll have leverage, and leverage, in a place like this, is worth more than any rule in Marla's book. Power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it slips quietly through an open door, waiting to see who notices. When the envelope lands in my mailbox, I almost miss it. Plain, unmarked, wedged between a utility bill and a coupon flyer, but I know what it is before I even tear it open. My fingers are steady, but my heart is already miles ahead. Inside, the truth is printed in black ink on cheap paper. The lake, our lake, isn't ours at all. It belongs to a faceless investment firm tucked away 2 towns over. Not a neighbor, not a person with a stake in the sunsets here, or the smell of wet cedar after a storm. Just a company, cold, calculating, profit-driven. I scanned the lease details twice, each pass drawing the noose a little tighter. 3 months. That's all the time the HOA has before the lease runs out. After that, it's up for negotiation, or for sale. I push the papers aside and open my laptop, fingers moving before my thoughts can catch up. The company's name leads me down a trail of financial reports, real estate listings, news clippings. It's worse than I hoped, and better. Their portfolios in free fall, properties dumped like ballast from a sinking ship. They're desperate for liquidity. The idea forms before I can stop it, sharp and dangerous. If I could get to them before Marla does, before the board even knows, everything could change. The lake isn't just water and reeds and idle afternoons, it's leverage, control. Whoever holds the deed holds the pulse of this neighborhood in their hand. I lean back in my chair, the glow from the screen washing the room in cold light. Outside, the cul-de-sac is still, save for the slow drift of leaves scraping across asphalt. A dog barks in the distance, its voice small against the night. I think about the last meeting, about the single mother, her face tight and pale, as Marla read out her $250 fine for improper holiday decor. The way the other board members looked away, their silence a kind of consent. If they knew what I know now, would they still cower, or would they scramble? The truth is, I don't care. I'm not here to awaken anyone's conscience. I'm here to tilt the balance. The numbers start stacking in my head, rough calculations of what it might cost, who might back me, how quickly I could make the offer. 3 months is nothing, 3 months is an eye blink. But desperation has a way of making the clock move faster. I read through the lease again, hunting for language that could be turned against the board. Terms about maintenance, water rights, public access. It's all there, buried in clauses no one bothers to read until it's too late. For a moment, doubt edges in. This is bigger than me, bigger than one act of quiet rebellion. What if it backfires? What if I end up the villain instead of the liberator? But then I think of Marla's smirk, the smug curve of it as she documented someone else's humiliation for the record. And just like that, the hesitation burns off. I close the laptop and gather the papers into a neat stack, sliding them into a folder marked with nothing more than a date. No one else needs to know, not yet. This isn't about making noise. It's about waiting for the perfect moment to cast the line. And when I do, the ripple will be felt all the way to the bottom of this lake. Some wars aren't fought in the open. They're signed into being with ink, sealed in envelopes, and slipped quietly under locked doors. The day I took the lake, the air felt different, thicker, like the neighborhood knew something had shifted even if it couldn't name it yet. It started weeks earlier, with a single phone call to a friend who owed me more favors than he'd admit. I need this airtight, I told him. Fast, clean, no wiggle room. He didn't ask why, he didn't have to. People like him understand the power of silence. We worked at night, hunched over legal pads and old property maps. The offer was simple: cash, no contingencies, no inspections. The kind of deal a drowning company grabs without reading the fine print. I made sure my name was the only one that would ever appear on the deed. Not a trust, not a shell, me. When the acceptance email came, I read it twice, then once more for the pleasure of it. Just a few lines confirming what I already knew: the lake, the docks, the event strip, all mine. No signatures from Marla, no permission from the board, no vote. Ownership doesn't roar. It doesn't have to. It sits in your hands like a loaded weapon, quiet and absolute. That night, I walked down to the water. The moon broke across its surface in fractured light, and the docks stretched out into the dark like skeletal fingers. I thought about all the picnics, the summer concerts, the 4th of July fireworks, every memory the HOA had planted here, all of it rooted in ground they no longer owned. By morning, the certified letter was ready. My lawyer friend had drafted it, but the words were mine. To the board of the Homeowners Association. It began: cold, formal, effective immediately. All HOA access to the lake and adjacent properties is suspended. Any continued use will be considered trespassing. I imagined Marla reading it, the pause, the way her lips would tighten, just enough to keep from showing teeth. The boardroom falling silent, save for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I didn't bother to see it delivered. Power doesn't need an audience. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the street. People went about their routines, jogging, walking dogs, scraping frost from windshields, without realizing the ground beneath them had shifted. They still thought the HOA ruled this place. They still thought Marla's word was law, but laws change when the land does. I knew the fallout was coming: the emergency meetings, the angry emails, the whispered accusations about how I'd pulled it off. Some would call me ruthless, others would call me a hero. Both would be wrong. This wasn't about heroism or cruelty. It was about removing a hand from my throat, about proving that even in a neighborhood built on rules, there's always a way to rewrite them. I thought about what to do next, whether to hold the lake hostage or rent it back to them at a cost that would bleed their budget dry. I didn't need to decide right away. The beauty of ownership is time. I could let them stew, let the panic bloom until it pushed them to act recklessly. That's when people make mistakes. That's when they give you more than you ever planned to take. By the time the sun dipped behind the rooftops, I knew one thing for certain: Marla would come for me. She couldn't help it. She'd have to test my claim, challenge it in some way, if only to save face. I almost smiled thinking about it, because the truth was, the lake was never the end game. It was just the opening move. Power doesn't just crumble in silence. Sometimes it detonates in front of everyone. Marla came in hot that night. You could feel it before she even spoke. The way people stiffened in their chairs, the air tightening like it knew something ugly was coming. She didn't bother with pleasantries. No welcome, no agenda, just straight into the attack. She called me reckless, selfish, dangerous. She said I'd robbed the community, that the lake belonged to everyone, not just me. Her voice was sharp, but behind it there was something else: desperation. She wanted the room on her side. She needed it, and for a while she almost had them. Heads nodded, a few muttered in agreement, but I'd come prepared. When she paused to catch her breath, I stood, not fast, not slow, just enough to make people watch me instead of her. I held up the folder I'd been carrying all week, thick with paper and proof. "Marla," I said, "you forgot to mention something." I started with the small things, the bylaw violations she'd quietly ignored when it suited her friends, the administrative fees she'd invented out of thin air. Then I went deeper: the inflated fines, hundreds of dollars over the legal limit, levied against residents who dared to challenge
I didn't
us.
need to. The facts did the cutting for me. At first there were only a few murmurs, but they spread row by row. I caught people glancing at each other, at the papers I held up, at her. Some frowned. Others leaned back in their seats, arms crossed, as if they'd just realized they were sitting too close to a fire. Marla tried to interrupt, But every time she opened her mouth I read another excerpt from her own records, her own words, her own numbers. By the time I finished she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was scanning the crowd, searching for the loyalty she thought was guaranteed. It wasn't there. A man in the back cleared his throat and asked, "Is this true?" She hesitated. Just a second, but it was enough. The silence was louder than any denial. Someone else spoke up, then another. Voices overlapped. The meeting had shifted, and she knew it. I didn't push it further. I didn't have to. A woman near the front pulled out a clipboard and started a petition. It passed from hand to hand, the scratch of pens on paper cutting through the room like a slow, steady drumbeat. By the time it reached the back, the page was full. Then another page. Twice the signatures they'd need to remove her. Marla stayed in her seat, rigid, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When the meeting ended, people filed out without the usual small talk. No one looked her in the eye. She sat alone at the head table, staring at the petitions stacked in front of her like they were foreign objects. I walked past without a word. Outside the night air felt lighter, the kind of lightness that comes when something heavy finally breaks. But I knew it wasn't over. People like Marla don't just vanish quietly. They regroup. They scheme. Still, the cracks were showing, and once power starts to leak you can never patch it completely. It's strange how silence can feel like revenge and grief all at once. That first weekend without the lake, the neighborhood moved differently, slower, quieter, as if everyone was holding their breath. The gates at the docks were chained shut, padlocks catching the sunlight like little points of finality. The water still moved, restless under the wind, but it wasn't for us anymore. No fishing lines trailing from the pier, no kids daring each other to jump in, just empty space where life used to spill over. From my porch I could see people pause at the path, stare at the locks and turn back. A couple with kayaks strapped to their roof drove by once, then again, then disappeared without even parking. It felt like the whole place had been robbed of its pulse. Marla's SUV sat in her driveway, the same spot it had been all week, windows up. No sign of her at the mailbox or in the yard. Maybe she was inside, curtains drawn, watching the neighborhood simmer. Maybe she was pretending not to care, but I knew she was counting the hours. People like her don't handle exile well. I walked the shoreline alone, the gravel crunching under my shoes, the air heavy with something I couldn't name. The lake was still beautiful, almost more so in its emptiness, without the laughter, the splashing, the hum of engines. It was pure again. But there was an ache in it too, like visiting an old friend you no longer speak to. I thought I'd feel nothing but satisfaction. I'd told myself this was justice, fair consequence, a rebalancing of power, and in some ways it was. But as I stood there watching the sunlight scatter across the ripples, I felt the edges of that satisfaction fray. This place had been ours, all of ours. The dock had been where neighbors met by accident and ended up talking for hours, where arguments cooled in the company of water, where kids learned to swim, and sometimes to lie about where they'd been. Closing it didn't just punish Marla, it cut something out of the neighborhood's heart. I caught my reflection in the water. It looked like me but sharper somehow, as if the fight had carved new lines into my face. I wondered how many of them were from the battle itself, and how many from what I'd done to win. Behind me, a screen door creaked. A voice called out, "Mr. Lang from 3 houses down." "Doesn't feel the same, does it?" he said, his hands buried in his jacket pockets. "No," I admitted. He nodded, eyes on the water, but maybe it's what she needed to see. We stood there for a moment, both of us watching the lake without speaking. I could feel the unasked question hanging between us, and what about what we needed? When he walked away, I stayed a while longer. The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of wet earth and pine. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. I traced the shoreline all the way to the far dock where the padlock hung heavy and deliberate. I touched it, cold metal biting at my palm, and for a brief moment I felt the full weight of what it meant, not just for Marla, but for everyone. The victory was real, the change was real, but in the quiet that followed, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd taken more than I meant to. The lake doesn't care who wins or loses, it just waits. It's a strange thing to finally get what you wanted and feel emptier for it. The fines are gone, the threats, the letters, the tense glances at meetings, gone. My mailbox doesn't rattle with warnings anymore. My nights aren't cut in half by the sound of my phone buzzing with some new complaint. The fear has dissolved, clean, like sugar in water, and yet, so has something else. It turns out the fight had been its own kind of oxygen. Every morning I'd wake with my jaw set, my pulse ready for the next blow. It kept me sharp, awake, alive in a way I didn't realize I depended on. Now there's a stillness in its place, a stillness that feels less like peace and more like vacancy. Neighbors pass me on the street, and I can feel them sorting themselves into their chosen camps. Some smile, not too wide, just enough to let me know they're glad someone finally stood up to her. Others, well, they glance away, or give a tight, brittle nod, the kind that says they'll never forgive me for upsetting the balance, even if the balance was rotten. Victory looks different depending on who's holding the frame. When I water the plants on my porch, I catch sight of Marla's SUV through the hedges, still there, still unmoved. She hasn't been at the docks, hasn't been at the clubhouse. Her absence is louder than her presence ever was. I don't know if she's plotting or licking her wounds, maybe both. But I know her well enough to be certain she's not gone. She's coiled, waiting. In the evenings I walk the streets just to feel the neighborhood breathe without her shadow over it. The air is lighter, kids laugh a little louder. People linger in their driveways. The change is real, you can taste it. But underneath there's this awareness, like we're all standing on a frozen lake, knowing the ice is thick enough for now, but listening for the first crack. A few days after it's all over, I see Mr. Lang again. He's pruning the hedges along his fence, clippers snapping rhythmically. "You did it," he says, not looking up. "Guess I did. Don't look too happy about it." I don't answer right away. He finally meets my eyes. "You miss the fight, don't you?" I almost laugh, but it's not funny. I don't miss her. I thought it would feel better than this. He nods slowly, like he's known the truth for a long time. That's the thing about winning. It's never the end of the story, just the end of a chapter. That night I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the streetlights flicker on. My hands are steady for the first time in months. My body should be relaxing into this, melting into the comfort of safety. But my chest feels heavier than it did when I was still fighting. Maybe because when you're in the middle of the battle, the lines are clear. There's you, there's them, and there's the space between you. But after you win, that space collapses, and you're left with yourself and everything you did to get here. The truth is, victory isn't a clean break. It's a slow settling of dust. You see what's left standing, and you notice what didn't survive the storm. I told myself this was about justice, about fairness, and it was, but there's a part of me, small, stubborn, that wonders if it was also about proving something, about showing I could win. And now that I have, what's left to fight for? The street is quiet, too quiet. I sip my coffee, cold and bitter, and think about the difference between winning and being free. Some people hand you truth like a gift. Others hand it like a loaded gun. Mrs. Latham's house smells like lemon polish and something older, the kind of scent that makes you feel both safe and a little trapped. She ushers me in with that small firm grip she has, the one that says she doesn't let go until she's finished saying what she means to say. The steam from the coffee curls between us as she sits down, her back straight, eyes sharp despite the years. "I remember when Marla first moved in," she begins, her voice low, as though the walls themselves could carry gossip. "She was different, kinder, but power, it's a slow poison. Some people sip it, others drink deep." I watch her fingers circle the rim of her cup. The porcelain clinks softly, a heartbeat in the silence. "She wasn't always like this," Mrs. Latham says again, almost to herself, "but once she got that seat on the board, it changed her. Changed what she thought she deserved, and what she thought she could take." Her words land heavier than I expect. I want to argue, to say that Marla was always a tyrant in the making, but I can't.
I've seen enough people shift under the weight of power to know she's right. You did the neighborhood a service, she adds, looking at me with something like gratitude, but also something sharper. You stopped her. At least for now, for now. The phrase sticks like a burr in my mind. She leans back, her voice softening but her gaze still fixed. Be careful with the lake, she says. It's more than water. It's a crown, and whoever wears it, well, they change too. I let the words settle. In another context, it would sound like superstition, a story told to children to keep them from wandering too close to the shore. But here, with Mrs. Latham's steady eyes and the faint tremor in her hands, it feels like a warning carved from experience. I take a sip of coffee. It's bitter, but it keeps me from speaking too quickly. You think I'm next? I ask, trying to make it sound like a joke. She doesn't laugh. I think you're human, she says simply. When I leave, the sun is just starting to drop behind the houses, painting the lake in molten gold. The gates are still locked, the dock still empty, but her words follow me down the path like a shadow I can't shake. On the walk home, I try to picture the lake as a throne. It's not hard. In this neighborhood, everything is currency, access, favors, grudges, and now I have something no one else does. The satisfaction of having beaten Marla, but satisfaction, I'm realizing, doesn't keep you warm for long. It just makes people start wondering what you'll do next. The houses on either side of me look different now, windows like watchful eyes, driveways like silent barricades. A few neighbors wave as I pass, and I can't tell if it's friendliness or reconnaissance. Victory shifts the air, changes the math. Before I was just another homeowner under siege. Now I'm a piece on the board, one worth moving against, if I stand in the wrong square. By the time I reach my porch, Mrs. Latham's warning has wound itself deep into my chest. The lake as a crown, the lake as a curse, the lake as a mirror that shows you the parts of yourself you'd rather keep hidden. Inside, the quiet feels heavier than usual. I make another cup of coffee I don't really want, just to have something in my hands. Her voice won't leave me. It's not the part about Marla that lingers. I already knew power had rotted her through. It's the implication that the same thing could happen to me. I tell myself it's ridiculous, that I'm not like her, that I fought because it was right, not because I wanted to sit where she sat. But the mind has a way of whispering what the heart tries to ignore. Outside, the lake catches the last light before the sky folds into darkness. It gleams like a thing alive. Patient, waiting. I don't know yet whether it's calling to me or warning me away. Some silences are earned, others are chosen. The lake lies still in front of me, its surface catching the pale gold of early spring. The air is softer now, the bite of winter gone, replaced with a breeze that smells faintly of thawed earth and budding grass. From the dock I can see my reflection, blurry, fractured by the ripples but steady, steadier than I've felt in months. No fines, no warnings in my mailbox, no careful scanning over my shoulder when I step outside. The neighborhood is quiet in a way it hasn't been since this all began. And yet, I know quiet isn't the same as peace. I hold the fishing rod loosely in my hands, line drifting lazily across the mirrored water. I'm not really here for the fish. This is just the kind of stillness you have to practice, the kind you don't get handed to you. The birds call in the distance, each one sounding like it belongs to a place that has never known conflict. I wonder what that would be like. I haven't opened the gates since the day I won. Not for meetings, not for gatherings, not for anyone curious to see what happens when the person they underestimated ends up holding the keys. Mrs. Latham's words still echo. The lake can be its own throne. I don't want a throne. I want something harder to name. Power's a strange thing. You think it's a weapon until it starts feeling like a weight. You can carry it, sure, but it changes the way you stand, and if you're not careful, it changes the way you see. Some of the neighbors still nod when they pass, others avoid eye contact. That's fine. I didn't do this for their applause. I did it because I refused to be ruled in my own home. But victory has a strange aftertaste, half sweet, half metallic. You learn quickly that not everyone celebrates the same ending. A leaf drifts across the lake, spins in a slow circle, then disappears under the dock. I watch it vanish and think about how easy it is for something to slip from sight, even when it's been in plain view. That's the thing about still water. It's not really still, things move beneath it, unseen. I wonder if Marla sits somewhere now, looking over her own stretch of water, thinking about what she lost. Or maybe she's already plotting the next move in some other corner of the world. People like her rarely stop, they just change arenas. The sun warms the side of my face, and for the first time in months, I don't feel that constant low thrum of tension in my chest. It's almost disorienting. When you've lived so long in a fight, the absence of it can feel like standing in an unfamiliar room. You have to relearn the shape of your own days. My line bobs gently, nothing bites. That's fine. This morning isn't about catching anything, it's about letting certain things drift away. I'm not ready to share this quiet with the neighborhood yet. I need to be sure it's mine first. That it's not just a pause before another storm, because here's what I've learned. Not all victories are meant to be celebrated out loud. Some you hold close, guarding them like a flame that the wrong wind could snuff out, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do with power is nothing. The water keeps its secrets, so will I.